This week's theme is the shaman's fate. I have already talked about Korean shamanism and shamans in many of my previous episodes. If you missed them, watching them first may help to understand today's episode. I'll leave the links to relevant episode in the description and at the corner of the screen. A shaman is basically a god's mouthpiece, a medium or an interpreter between the divine world and common people. One cannot become a shaman just because one wants it or was born with a strong spiritual gift. One has to be chosen by a shamanic deity. But such a calling is considered a doom by many. Not only the social standing as a professional shaman is a dubious one, most people remain skeptical and consider shamans a con or simply insane. But also, once you accept the role of a shaman, your life is not entirely yours anymore. Your god or gods would dictate your life, and it often implies giving up an ordinary life of marriage, children, and normal working life. But a shamanic god's call is not something one can easily dismiss. For people who are used to the image of the Christian God, a god might be supposed to be all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-justful, but shamanic gods are much more like humans. They can be just as spiteful, demanding, jealous, and relentless as a stubborn person. If his or her subject should refuse to accept God's calling, the god would make the person suffer both physically and mentally. In Korean shamanism, it's referred as 신병 or 무병, the divine or shaman's illness. If the person should still refuse, then the god is ready to bring misfortune or even death to the people dear to the person. At the end of such a battle, some may accept the shaman's fate, some may carry on fighting with the help either from shamanism or other religions, or some may lose and be consumed in that process. Today, I'm going to read 3 stories about people who struggle the shaman's fate. They are individual cases and cannot represent the people with the same struggling as a whole. Also, whether you believe the whole shamanism and shamanic gods be true or not is up to you. I simply present them as they are, as a part of Korean culture and reality of some people. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by a host. Anthony. Through the whole female line of my mom's family runs very strong spiritual gift. Some of them worked as professional shaman. As for mom's mother, my grandma, she too accepted a shamanic god, though she didn't actually work as a shaman. I still remember the colorful dress and a corn hat, shaman's ritual costume, hanging in grandma's room. My mom is her 6th child, and from the beginning was born with divine powers all wrapped around her. From early childhood, Grandma took little mom to famous and powerful shamans to avoid shaman's fate, but all of them only said there was no way she could avoid it. As I said, mom's gift is indeed very strong. I could literally never dare to tell her a lie or fool her, because whatever I did with whomever, she knew everything exactly. Once she visited a famous shaman, and all she said was, "What are you doing here, when your divine power surpasses mine? My god is but a little kid comparing to yours." But whatever power she may have, I can't say I envy her fate. She has suffered various shaman's illness and been fighting an endless battle to set herself free from God's call. And the struggle carries on to this day when she is now well over 50. Anyway, I should like to recount one of the most bizarre episodes out of mom's endless battles. I think it was when I was 12 or 13. At the time, mom was suffering particularly severe bouts of shaman's illness. She couldn't sleep for days, and she barely managed to fall asleep. She would get a dream of being dragged out to a shamanic ritual. Or in one dream, a man in a traditional general's uniform, signifies a shamanic deity, slashed Mom's wrist with a big sword. When she woke up, she found a red line over her wrist. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and suffered so much that she finally decided to get a big shamanic ritual. In this case, it's called 누름꽃, basically meaning to appease to shamanic gods to soften or withdraw their demand over their subject, namely my mom in this case. It was to be really a big ritual, no joke. It was to be led by 3 big shamans, assisted by 5 junior shamans, and even 1 monk. Goes without saying, the expense was huge too. Anyway, the big day was set and the preparation was on the way. But just a few days before the ritual, the oldest big shaman who was to lead the whole ritual summoned Mom to her.
"It is risky. Dangerous even. I prayed for 3 days and contemplated whether I was ready to risk my life for this ritual. If it goes wrong, it could only trigger even bigger wrath from gods. I'll do my best to prepare and execute it, but please understand, what is impossible is impossible,"
the big shaman said. The big day came, and Mom went to the mountain where the ritual was to take place at the crack of dawn. I myself wasn't present because of school, so the rest is what Mom later recounted. A long table full of food offerings was set, musicians were tuning their instruments, and all the shamans too dressed up for the occasion. It was all ready for the oldest shaman to come out and start the ritual.
"Are you ready, Mother?"
a junior shaman politely asked. Shamans would address their mentor as Mother.
Yes, I'm ready,"
said the oldest shaman, and appeared from the room. And the moment she took the first step outside, she just dropped on the floor. She was unconscious and was hurriedly sent to hospital. Everybody was lost a while, until the other 2 big shamans decided to carry on anyway. But as the oldest shaman already predicted, it was to be a tough task. 7 shamans and a monk danced, chanted, and tried every trick in the book, but failed to contact Mom's gods. When gods come, the subject will react with typical dance-like physical manifestations. The ritual that started at 10 in the morning carried on till 6 in the evening, but Mom didn't even flinch a toe all the while. Everybody was exhausted. In the end, 1 big shaman called for an urgent help from another big shaman who was said to be an old friend to the oldest shaman who was now unconscious in the hospital. The new shaman joined past 9 p.m. and only then, Mom started to react, jumping up and down. That way, the new shaman managed to appease to various gods from Mom's ancestry to set Mom free. And finally, the biggest of them all was left.
"Over 1 mountain, then waits even higher mountain. Just as dangerous and worthwhile as my friend to have risked her life,"
the new shaman exclaimed. The last god took over Mom and angrily taunted the shamans through her mouth. "You thought with this much offering and effort could appease me?
"We apologize and seek your mercy. Please have a pity on this poor woman and set her free of your demand,"
the new shaman begged. But the god only huffed and took up the ritual sword and danced around, basically totally disregarding the request. The new shaman chanted some spell to take over the control of the situation, but Mom, taken over by the big god, only glared back. You can't do anything to me! You can't get rid of me! No, take me! She shouted, and started flipping the table. The new shaman had to stop the contact, and the ritual had to pause. It picked up again past 2 in the morning. The shaman danced, chanted, beat drums, but Mom already realized they could not help her, and she felt more irritated and exhausted than anything else. At the end, shamans claimed that they trapped the god in a set of hanbok, the traditional dress, and handed it over to Mom. The following day, Mom burnt it off in the garden, swearing about the useless shamans. The oldest shaman, who collapsed even before the ritual, passed away in the end, I hear. My dad passed away when I was 2. Mom had to work to make a living, and I was sent to live with Grandma. I saw Mom only once a year when she came to see me. After 2 short days together, she would give me a handful of coins, telling me to buy myself snacks, and would go away again. I cried a lot because I had to wait another long time till I could see her again. Not far from Grandma's was Mom's childhood friend. By and by, I became friends to her children, especially the youngest, who happened to be the same age as myself. I'll call him Sangil for the sake of the story. When I was about 8, Sangil came over one day and told me I should come to his place. He whispered in my ear so that Grandma couldn't hear. "Your mom is there." I was young, but could guess it couldn't be a normal situation if Mom should stay at her friend's rather than come directly to me at Grandma's. On the way to Sangil's, he cautiously said,
Your mom, she's a bit, she's not mad, but she sometimes speaks in a grandpa's voice and then act like a baby. I'm just saying so that you don't get shocked later.
What the heck was he talking about? My heart pounded hard. But when I reached Sangil's home, I found Mom just chatting with her friend in the living room. She looked just the same. What a relief. I jumped in her arms and bursted into cry. I don't know what kind of adult's business unfolded behind my back, but a month later, Mom took me back with her and showed me her new home. It was a large house with 4 rooms, 2 bathrooms, with a rooftop and garden, and even 2 side buildings to let. At my grandma's, I had to share 1 room with Grandma and Uncle. Now at my mom's place, I got my own room and so much space to play and roam around. Except for 1 small room, I could see a red light was on inside through the frosted glass door. It was a few days later that Mom called me to her room. She held my hand and looked straight into my eyes and opened her mouth.
I have something to tell you, my dear. I'm sure you know Mom is not scary or mad. You are so young, and I'm not sure how I can explain it easy for you, but you are the most dear person in my life, and I have to tell you that I get to do the work that I didn't want to. Sadly, I have no choice, because if I refused, I would get ill, and people dear to me also could face a big accident or even lose life. So, now I serve Buddha, and many gods around Buddha. God of Mountain, Little Boy, Granny Samshin. And these gods, on occasions,
would come to me and use me as their mouthpiece, so that I can tell people's fortune and help them prepare the future. In such an instance, Mom may act and speak like a different person. I'm sure you'd feel confused when you see it. But, as I said, I had to take this job. At this point, Mom's eyes got wet. My eyes welled up too, but I thought Mom would get too sad should I show my tear to her. I looked straight back at her, wide-eyed, and just nodded my head assuringly. So, my puppy understands, Mom? Thank you, my sweet. My boy is not afraid of his mom, is he? It's the same old Mom. It's just when I work in that room with a red light. In that room, I serve Buddha and other gods, and only there you may find me a bit different, Mom said. It was only many years later, when I finished my military service, that I asked Mom what exactly happened that she chose to become a shaman. What she told me was, since when Mom couldn't focus on her work, her body would ache all over, didn't feel any energy, and yet doctors couldn't diagnose what was wrong with her. She would constantly run into troubles with her roommate too, and all she could think about was that she wanted to die. And one day, she emptied a bottle of soju and went to the big bridge. Looking down the deep river running underneath, she contemplated about jumping down. But then she thought of little me, and after 4 hours, finally went back to her room. She apologized to her roommate and went to bed. In the dream that night, Mom found herself in a strange place. In front of her was a steep hill with a narrow trail, and at her back was a sharp cliff down to a pitless abyss. Well, the only way was up, but before she could move, suddenly 2 black figures appeared and subdued Mom by grabbing her shoulders hard. It was so bone-crushingly painful that she screamed. And as if that was a call, a monk in a white cloak went down from the hill with a smirk on his face.
Everything will be fine if you just choose to accept my beads. How dare you contemplate to throw your life out instead?
He taunted and pushed Mom to the cliff. No, I didn't mean to die. Let me live, Mom begged.
So, are you finally going to accept me?
Said the monk, and pushed Mom hard one more time. Mom's feet were already off the edge of the cliff and in the air. She had no choice but grip on the monk's string of beads and clenched her eyes. Ironically, it was when she opened her eyes in real life and woke up from the dream. Her roommate was crying, holding Mom. Apparently, in the middle of the night, Mom screamed and sat up straight and stayed frozen in that position for 5 hours. Mom's roommate panicked, thinking something must be terribly wrong with Mom, but somehow she also felt she had to wait. So she didn't call an emergency. As for Mom, she felt now strangely light and clear-headed, as if all the illness of mind and body she'd been suffering was but a mirage. And that's how she became a shaman. Fortunately, her business was rather successful, and so she could buy that big house, and finally living together with her son, me. It goes a couple of decades back, when I was a middle school student. A new student transferred to my class. I'll call him Tuhyun here for the sake of the story. He came to study in Seoul all by himself. The fact that he led an independent life by himself at such a young age was enough to trigger our interest. He proved himself to be a true Renaissance man, tall, friendly-faced, smart, sporty, and very sociable too. We became particularly close, sharing the same passion about the Nintendo game console and its games. It was long before internet, so the game console was about the best we could get. The information about new games and game manuals were hard to come by, and we bonded together, sharing what little information we had and hunting around for a new game pack. Summer vacation came. It was the time before mobiles, and because Tuhyun's lodging was not connected to landline, I didn't hear from him for a few weeks. At the time, there was an assembly day in the middle of the vacation. Students were supposed to turn up, clean the classrooms, and report to their teachers how their vacation was going. And Tuhyun didn't turn up. It wasn't like him because he was such a straight model student. I worried if everything was all right with him, so I asked my teacher for his address and went over to his lodging. I was half expecting he might be away to see his family, but to my surprise, he opened the door. And I almost had to take a step back, because Tuhyun didn't look like himself at all. What used to be a smooth, round face and sporty figure now was shrunken down to bones. Eyes looked hollow, and his complexion was almost grey. "Tuhyun, are you all right? Have you been ill?" I said.
No. I'm alright. I just lost some weight. Come in,"
Tuhyun said. It was the first time for me to visit his place. It was modest and sparsely furnished, but clean and orderly, attesting Tuhyun's character. With me next to him, Tuhyun quickly regained his energetic self, and we were soon chatting away about games, playing games, and so on. When I stood up to go came the evening. Tuhyun asked me if I didn't want to stay the night at his place. So we had ramen for dinner, played some more games, and went to bed quite late. And only when the light was off, Tuhyun said,
"You know, from about a month ago, I get a nightmare every night. Drives me nuts, because I hardly get a sound sleep."
"Gosh, are you trying to scare me before sleep or what?" I grumbled.
"Sorry, bro. What's the friend for, though?"
"Oh, shut up. So, what's the nightmare about?"
"In the middle of the night, I feel breathless and heavy on my chest. I open my eyes. I see an old man, completely black, even his eyes. He's sitting on my chest and strangled me while chanting, 'Die, die,' with his cracked voice. I can't breathe, I can't move. And that's been repeating every night for 20 days already."
I didn't hear anything. Why are you effing telling me this in bed?
Okay. Sorry. Well, sleep now. Let's hit the town tomorrow to check out game shops.
And soon I fell asleep. But what's this? I felt breathless and heavy on my chest. Something was grabbing around my throat too. What Tuhyun described earlier was happening to me exactly. "Die! Die!" Even that grating voice whispering in my ear. I've had sleep paralysis before, but nothing was quite like this. I was scared to death, but thought I would really die if I let it carry on. So counted 1, 2, 3, and popped my eyes open. I would never forget what I saw in front of my eyes. It was Tuhyun, my friend. He was mounting on my chest and strangling me. His eyes were all rolled back, and his head was shaking side to side, while that grating "Die, die" came out of his lips. I screamed and pushed Tuhyun away. He fell off of me surprisingly easily. He was much sportier than I, and normally he wouldn't have budged. I crawled out of his room and ran all the way back home, barefooted. I never talked about that night to anyone. Guess I actively wanted to wipe it out of my memory altogether. On the first day of the new school term, I dreaded to face Tuhyun again. I deliberately took the farthest seat from our usual spot and didn't even turn my head to the direction of him. During the recess, Tuhyun came up to me.
"Hey, buddy, why did you go without telling me that day?"
he said. I couldn't say anything.
"What's up? Did I do something wrong?"
No, that's not it," I mumbled.
"No, then you are guilty of something, ain't I right?"
Tuhyun said. He seemed to have genuinely no idea what happened. I couldn't possibly recount the horror I felt of him, though. I just evaded the situation and got on with him. But our relationship was never quite the same. After such a few uneasy days, one morning, Tuhyun didn't come to school. As I said, he was such a model student, and he never skipped or even late for a class. But he didn't come to school the following day either. On the fourth day of his absence, I saw white chrysanthemum on his desk. That's a funeral flower in Korea, signifying death. In the evening 4 days prior, he was hit by a car at the crossway near his lodging. The car ran away, leaving Tuhyun on the road, and he was run over by the second car and was killed on the spot, I was told. I don't have much recollection as of what happened for the rest of the year. Almost a year later, a mate who was the student representative chatted me up about Tuhyun for some reason. It was about what he heard about Tuhyun's tragic and bizarre history when he attended his funeral as the student representative. According to what two drunken relatives talked among themselves at the funeral, the reason Tuhyun's mother sent him to Seoul alone was, apparently, an effort to save Tuhyun from his doomed fate. Tuhyun's grandfather was a shaman. Not a good one, but more like a black witch, putting curse and pray for the downfall of people. His son, who married Tuhyun's mother, was just as nasty piece of work. A famous drunkard and a troublemaker in the village, he would hit neighbors regardless of the age and would harass women. Then about 3 years before Tuhyun was born, he was killed in the village storage that he himself set on fire. Losing his son, Tuhyun's grandfather lost his mind. He blamed his daughter-in-law for his son's misfortune and abused her in all sorts of creepy ways, like splashing chicken blood over her while she was asleep. It got only worse when the poor woman was forcefully molested by one of the late husband's just as nasty friends and got pregnant with Tuhyun. Now, the grandfather's target shifted to little Tuhyun. The old man declared Tuhyun was going to serve his god now, and made not yet 2-year-old boy do all sorts of creepy things, like making him to carry a blood-stained nail or a woman's underwear. Or one time, even making him sleep in a coffin, naked. Even in that small village where almost any dark news would get swept under the carpet, the old man's behavior was condemned, and neighbors shunned the family off. When Tuihan turned 4, his grandfather was found dead in the bamboo forest by the reservoir. Finally free from the nasty old man, his mother tried to raise her son like a normal family. But little Tuihan showed weird signs. He would be humming the tune his mad grandfather used to hum all the time. One night, his mother woke up and found him doing something in the dark. The little boy had drawn a face of a person and wrote down a name on a paper and was stabbing it with a little knife. His weird behavior got only more pronounced over time. One day, a villager found Tuihan in the burnt ruin of the former village storage where his mom's husband was burned to death, and the boy's voice and mannerisms resembled that of the dead man. His mom was too poor to seek help from a shaman or throw a shamanic ritual. Instead, she moved with her son to an empty house on the other side of the village, which seemed to have improved Tuihan's condition. But his weird behavior returned not quite 3 months after. So his mother gathered every penny she had saved to send Tuihan away to Seoul, hoping that the further distance might save her son from the growing shadow of the doom. But it was all in vain. I could not say anything. Having seen Tuihan in that state that night firsthand, I could not brush off the story as just some superstition of country people. Poor Tuihan. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. What would you have done if you found yourself in the same shoes of people in today's stories? I'm frankly not sure myself. We largely grow up under the notion of we can do anything we want to and become everything we want to be. But life can definitely throw something at us that cannot be thwarted by an individual's willpower. If you enjoyed my work, please give it a thumbs up and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. If you'd support me more directly, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account. The link's in the description. There's also a super thanks option here on YouTube for a small donation. In whichever form, I'm always very grateful for your support. Thank you. Until next Sunday, stay safe and take care.